Hi, this is Brett Ingram, award-winning entrepreneur, and today I want to share with you how to screen and hire the right freelancer or outsourcer. So if we've taken the plunge to finally outsource and decide that we want to get more done without having to do it all ourselves, and we've recognized what a value or what a potential benefit we can get from outsourcing, then that's a huge step. I know for me, when I finally made the mental shift, I knew sort of intellectually it was the right thing I needed to do. I knew realistically I could never get all the work done that I was trying to do. At the same time, I had some sort of a mental block or some inertia about actually making the decision to outsource and to hire outsourcers. And once I got over that, and once I shifted that and decided I was going to do it, then of course I went on and made a bunch of mistakes doing it. But the point is, once we've done that, then step one is accomplished, okay? And then the second thing is, hopefully we've also already created a clear job description. I did an episode on that. It's super important if we're going to outsource that we don't just throw up a couple of bullet points about what we're looking for and then hire the first person. I lost tons of money and tons of time doing that, and I learned a lot through the process. And that's how I developed the structure and the processes that I have now. And so I did another episode on how to create the perfect job description for an outsourcer. Recommend that you watch or listen to that if you haven't seen it yet. And once we've got that, we're 90% of the way there, but we're still not quite there. Okay, we've made the decision. We've got the specs all written out in terms of what we want, and then we post it, right? And we're really excited because the candidates start rolling in. Now, in general, when I'm referencing this, I'm going to talk mostly my personal experiences, mostly with Upwork.com. However, that said, this will work on any freelancing site or any freelancing sort of engagement. It doesn't matter. The process is the same. The ideas are the same. So the candidates start rolling in. I know on Upwork they do, and it gets very exciting because some of them come through and they're top-rated freelancers and they have 95% or 100% positive feedback. And if we're overwhelmed, the tendency or the sort of gut feeling knee-jerk reaction is, boom, let's just hire that person and get him going. I got one good one, why bother even looking at the rest? The price looks good, they're 100% feedback, boom, let's go do it. I can promise you, if you do that, you will more often than not hire the wrong person. I've done this over and over again, and I've made that mistake, relying on a platform or on other people's opinions to decide whether a person was right or not for me. It would be like having your friend decide who you're going to date. They might like the person or not, but it's a very individual thing. And each of our work environments, each of our entrepreneurial ventures are all unique in their own way and different. And our personalities are all unique and different. So the way we work and the kinds of people we work best with are also different. So it's super important to understand that it goes deeper than just a couple of bullet points on a resume and a great job, review rates or whatever else. I mean, that's all valuable. I'm not saying we discard that, but we have to go a little bit deeper. So the temptation is to jump into the first great match, but don't do that because we've done 90% of the hard part, but we just need to finish it off the right way so we don't end up with the wrong candidate. When I was outsourcing my first go around, I was so excited about the idea, I didn't even write out a good job description. And I can tell you that was a disaster. I hired a few people. I hired more than I could handle at once, which was problem number one. Problem number two is I didn't have a clear idea what everybody was going to be doing to begin with. And then problem three was that I didn't really closely screen candidates. It was my first experience, so I didn't know better. I thought, well, geez, if they're applying for the job and they look like they've got the requirements for it, why not hire them? They're going to be able to do it. And certainly that's going to take all this stuff off my plate. The fourth mistake that I made was I just dumped everything on them. I said, okay, once somebody came in, okay, you're a graphic designer, this is what I need you to do. without a lot of direction or anything else. And it wasn't realistic on my part to even think that that would work, let alone have it work, and of course that it didn't. Once I started to figure out I needed to be a little bit more clear up front with what I wanted, that it got a little bit better. I started to post job descriptions. I got a little bit more detailed about them. Once I made about hire, I adjusted my job description to sort of weed that part of it out also. And I started to narrow it down, and that got better. But I didn't get really good with the outsourcing until I took this final step. And that is to actually follow this last process where we're going to vet candidates, because I developed a simple process for vetting and screening candidates that's super effective. It's actually really simple, and it's disarmingly, seems common sense and simple. At the same time, it's very effective at weeding out people that we don't want to hire and making the higher percentage of the right hires the first time. So in my personal experience, while Upwork and probably some other places too allow you to use pre-screening questions. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, this is great. This is going to take all the work off my plate. All I've got to do is populate a few pre-screening questions, and in fact, they've even got them there for me. All I got to do is pick them from a list. In my experience, the pre-screening questions are largely a waste of time. What ends up happening is, no matter what ones you ask, what the candidate does is they copy and paste parts from your job description and spit it back to you. So if one of the questions is, what are you most excited about this job? And in the job description, it says you're going to be working in a fast-paced environment. You're going to be doing new things every day. You're going to need to, take initiative. They'll say to it, they'll paste in and edit it a little bit. I'm excited about working in a fast-paced environment. I'm excited about rolling up my sleeves and getting new things done. I'm excited about needing to take initiative. That's literally useless. They're basically telling you exactly what you told them you're looking for. So in my experience, the pre-screening questions are a waste of time. I've yet to find one that's really good. Some of them are okay, but some are better than others. But in general, that's what candidates are going to do. So instead, what I do, instead of using that, is I follow this process. And while it isn't perfect, it weeds out bad eggs, and the percentage of good hires goes way up. So the first thing that I do is I recommend you review the profile. Okay, it seems obvious at first, but there's specific things that we're looking for. Obviously, you're going to look at what the candidate's profile is. And we want to see what the feedback percentage is. That's always like front and center. They've done jobs. They have a feedback percentage of how positive their job success rate is. So if they had 10 jobs and 8 of them they got really good reviews, their success rate is 80%. In general, obviously, the higher the feedback percentage, the better. However, it's important to note that some candidates will do things like say to their employer or the contractor, the parent company, what do I need to do to get a 5-star review? If I don't get 5-star reviews, then what's going to happen is, it's going to cost me this. So they do things to structure it, and they ask the person in advance, what can I do to get a 5-star review? It's not a bad idea, but it's sort of jury-rigged a little bit in the sense that it's not all authentic. They aren't proactive client reviews where they're giving the client that feedback. They're coming to you saying, what do I need to do to get this 5-star review? Some clients just don't want to be bothered, so they'll just do it. Other clients will tell them, oh, well, if you did this little extra thing for me, I'll give you 5 stars, so they do it. So the feedback percentage is important, but it's not the be-all, end-all. Just because someone has 100% feedback or 90% feedback doesn't mean they're a perfect fit. The second thing we want to look at is we want to look at the money earned. This is valuable because we don't care how much money they make. What we care about is how much experience they have on the platform so we can see whether or not they're really experienced. If it's their first job or they haven't earned anything, it's very hard to vet whether or not they're going to be good. It doesn't mean they're not good. It doesn't mean we wouldn't hire them. But it is one of the things that we can weed people out by. If someone has done a lot of contracts and they've earned a lot and they have a high feedback percentage, it starts to give us more of a composite of what they're like. The next thing we want to look at is the reviews themselves, reading the reviews, not just how many stars they got, but we want to read the reviews, and here's the key. We want to read the low ones. If somebody has a 4.5 rating and 90% of their feedback are 5 stars, those are all going to be like, awesome, recommend that you work with them, give them any job, I'd work with them again. That's great. And it's super, good on them that they got those kinds of recommendations. But in general, all that's going to do, if we're high on a candidate, is reinforce our preconceived idea that this is a good candidate. We don't want to do that. We want to try to debunk it. When we go into screening candidates, we want to look for flaws, not look for reasons to hire, look for reasons to not hire. It sounds counterintuitive, but the reality of it is it's super smart, because what this does is it allows us to not get judgment clouded by our own opinion and desire to hire somebody. If we're looking for flaws and we can't find them, we got a winner, right? So what we want to do is we want to look at the reviews and we want to read the ones that are less than 5 stars, particularly the lowest ones. We want to see what the problems are. Sometimes the problem is with the hiring manager, no doubt about it. It's not always the candidate's fault. Sometimes it is the candidate, and if it's something like dependability is super important, and they got mostly good reviews, but 3 of them say, well, they just disappeared and stopped communicating. So then we had to end the contract. That's a huge red flag. When they find something better, or they get busy, or they're oversubscribed, they're just going to ignore you. So if dependability is a key element of what you're hiring for, you don't want that person, right? So it's super important to read those reviews. And also, if the candidate put in a rebuttal, it will allow the candidate to give feedback too. So sometimes the client will say, well, the person, didn't do it exactly the way we want. And then the candidate will say, well, they gave me a vague job description on day 1. And then when I asked them questions, they never answered them. Okay, well, so now the employer might be at fault here. It might not be the candidate's fault. So we want to get a sense of that. We also want to look for comparable jobs. This is super important. Sometimes you'll get a candidate, 5-star reviews, glowing this, glowing that, everything's perfect. They got the skills that you're looking for. They worked in a real estate office. They worked for a shipping company. They worked for a nonprofit, and you're running a software business. That doesn't mean they're not a good fit, but it does mean that they haven't worked in an industry, or they worked at a company where it's, a large company and they were a single outsourcer doing a little job. You're in an entrepreneurial environment where it doesn't work that way. You need them to roll up the sleeves and do various other things, not sit in a silo and do the same thing over and over again. So we want to look for comparable jobs from an environment standpoint. Is it big or small? Is it entrepreneurial, or is it sort of structured and fixed? We want to look for comparable jobs from an industry standpoint. If we want a social media marketer and they're working in the medical field, right, and we have a sports equipment company, is that a good fit? It might be, it might not be. The point is we want to see if there's any parallels with the industry and the environment. And we want to look at the number of active jobs they have right now. This is a clever, sneaky thing. Some contractors are always looking for more work. And if they have good reviews, it's very easy for them to keep adding on jobs. If you look at their current job descriptions, it will say the dates that they ran those jobs. And it'll say to present, to present. Sometimes you'll run into an outsourcer where they have 4 or 5 or 6 active jobs. Now, if the job that you need done is, hey, you know what, create these graphics, get them to me in a week or 2, no big deal. If the job you have is, I need somebody at my beck and call, that every time that I have an issue with a customer or issue with a client, they can pick it up and take it and run with it. Well, that person, that's going to be a red flag, because they're oversubscribed. They've got so many things going on. They're trying to earn so much money from so many different contractors that they might not be the right fit. Even though they're great, they might be oversubscribed. I've hired people that were very good when they could bring their services to bear. The problem is they weren't dependable. They were too slow in getting everything done, not because they were slow, but because they were trying to service 5 contracts at the same time. So we have to be conscious of that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at all of that kind of stuff. And what we're going to do at that point is either shortlist or delist every one of them. Obviously, the other thing I didn't even put in this list is salary, price, right? Obviously, you're going to get some candidates where you're like, yes, I need an executive admin for a small entrepreneurial environment. they're like $65 an hour. You could just delist those people. Obviously, they're working in an executive management function for a large company. That isn't going to be the right fit, but assuming obviously we're going to weed out by price, it's important not to just go with the lowest price. Anything that you think is reasonable for the value you're getting. I would rather pay somebody $10 an hour to get twice the productivity than $7.50 or $8 to get a single amount of productivity. So we have to look at cost versus benefit and the return on our investment, not just the pure dollar value. So then we're going to shortlist or delist. So delisted ones we're done with. We don't need to tell them that. Shortlisted ones are ones that we're moving on to the next stage of the process. So the second step in the process is to ask them a question. It doesn't even matter what it is. Do you like rainbows, right? It doesn't even matter what it is. For all shortlisted candidates, we do this for a very specific reason. We ask them a question. Send them something in the chat. And if you have something valuable to ask about the job, fantastic. If you can't think of anything, ask them what their favorite food is. Ask them it doesn't matter. What we're looking for, right, is what we want to do is we want to gauge a couple of things by asking them a question. We're going to gauge their communication skills, right? Because when they respond, we want them to respond with more than one word answers. So your favorite food, it would have to be like, what's your favorite food and why? We want to gauge their communication skills. Can they write clearly in our native language? Do they phrase things in a way that makes sense? Does it come across? What's the tone that comes across in their ability to communicate? We want to gauge their responsiveness. How fast do they respond? Now, in all fairness here, if you send somebody a message and it's 2 a.m. for them, you can't expect them to respond in 10 minutes. So you have to give them a reasonable amount of time. However, when you do this, what you'll find is some people will respond within, a normal amount of time when they're back online. Other people, it'll go 2 or 3 days. If it's 2 or 3 days for responsiveness for a question that's simple, to vet them before you've even hired them when they're trying to get the job, that's a red flag. If they're not responsive when they're trying to get your job, what's going to happen once you've hired them? We're looking for thoroughness. If you ask a good question, do they just answer it with 1 or 2 word answers like they're in a rush? Or do they actually take time to answer what you're asking? We can gauge attitude. Is it this curt little quick response like, can't be bothered with you, I'm annoyed by this? Or is it this, hey, so glad that you reached out, like blah, blah, blah. You can gauge attitude from that. You can also gauge their availability. How often are they going to be able to be responsive? And you can gauge their level of thinking. If you ask any reasonable question, you can see how they think based on their response. That's a lot of information. We can learn a lot from that. And if need be, follow up with another one. Don't be bashful. I've asked candidates 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. If they get annoyed and don't answer, they're done. Because the fact is, they're trying to get a job, and this is a job that in general, when I hire, it's somebody that I'm going to be using for months or maybe years down the road. So this is a big investment on my part long term and a big money maker for them, long term. If they don't want to be bothered answering questions, that's fine. I'll go with candidates who do. So that's really important. And then we're going to weed our shortlist down even further. We're going to delist the ones we're not happy with and keep the other ones on the shortlist. The third step is if a candidate has an audio or video interaction as part of their role, then do an audio or video interview. If not, you can skip this step. In most cases, I don't do this. But if I have someone who has to interface with clients, with partners, with anybody involved in my firm where they're going to represent me, and they have to do it on the phone or they have to do it live with a video, if they do it on the phone, I want a phone interview because I want to see how they sound. I don't want to know what they look like. I want to see what they sound like. If they're going to be interacting with people on video, I want to see what they look like on video. Because that is really important, that they're going to represent you and your company. If not, skip this. If you do it, then you weed the shortlist down even further. Step 4 is if the candidate will be creating any content for you. Graphics, videos, images, PDFs, guides, white papers, ebooks, whatever it is. Any kind of text, written, video, audio content. Ask for samples of their work. Even though they've done a tremendous amount of work and might have gotten all glowing reviews, you need to gauge whether or not it matches your expectations. Sometimes people will do an excellent job, but again, they're in a different industry, or the job expectations for that company is different. And sometimes it's excellent, but it just isn't, it doesn't match your image for your company or your aesthetic. I've hired graphic designers where everything about it was great. And I looked at their designs and I said, I can see why people would love this, but it doesn't fit the image for my company. So I can't use them even though I think they're an excellent designer. It does happen. So you want to gauge that. If they were creating that for you, would you be happy with it? Would you be proud of it? Would you let them release that to the public? If not, even if they're great at what they do, we don't want them. So we weed the shortlist down even further. And then the fifth step, this is where we finally get to where the rubber meets the road. We hire the best candidate. But what we do, and this is really important, is first off, we onboard them. And I'm going to talk about that more on another video, on another episode, because it's important we onboard them the right way. Again, even though they're an outsourcer, huge mistakes I made. But we're going to give them a small job to start. This is hugely important. Sometimes we feel like we made the hire, we're done. Give them every single thing and say, run with it. The problem with that is, if we give them the whole role, then it becomes harder for them to get going. It's overwhelming. They can't fixate on any one thing. And also, we're knee deep in the problem before realizing they're not working out. It takes a couple of weeks to get them up to speed. And then we find out, oh, the quality of the work isn't what I thought. Also, they're more likely to get overwhelmed and quit or disappear if we dump everything on them at once. Give them one small piece. If you have a massive graphic design project, give them one little piece of it. Oh, create the 3 banners for this thing. If when those banners come back you don't like them, you could also get them to make adjustments before they've done all the work, and then you're not happy with it. You make adjustments. If the corrections made are good, then you give them the rest of the job. If they're not, you release them, you go hire somebody else, and you start over. That's why you start with a small project. It minimizes your risk, minimizes your time and money investment, and it lets you vet on the job their ability and success rate. And if they're successful, then you add more and more to the job. When we take the extra time to screen candidates, we can further weed out people who are not a fit, even though they look good on paper. And there are some of those. And we can increase the odds that we make the right hire the first time. So the takeaway here is that screening and vetting candidates is super important to avoid making bad hires and hire more freelancers that are a good fit from the start. It can feel like the work is done when we write out the job description and start getting candidates. But while it gets a bunch of applicants, it doesn't mean they're a great fit. By following a few extra steps, we can dial in on the candidates and have the best chance of adding the right member to the team.